I told you already, if he's not a paying member, drag his stinking veteran ass out the back. Let me ask you something. If you saw an old man in a military jacket being slammed to the ground outside a luxury golf club, would you speak up or stay silent? Comment below. Do you think being poor means you lose your right to dignity, even if you once served this country? Because what you're about to witness will shake your idea of justice to its core. The man in question, hunched over and quiet, didn't flinch when those words were shouted. He sat beside the grease vent behind the Elm Ridge Country Club kitchen, his back against the brick wall, steam rising around him like battlefield smoke. His jacket was olive green but weather-stained and faded with a crooked patch that once read U.S. Marines. His name, Gerald Knox, was stitched just above his heart, nearly worn away. Brian Halston, the owner of the Elm Ridge Club, stood on the second-floor balcony in a cashmere sweater and khakis, wine glass in hand. His voice cut through the cold like broken glass. He's been back here every night this week, sleeping under my vent like a damn possum. You think that uniform gives him rights here? It gives him nothing. Two security guards stood near the back kitchen door, unsure whether to intervene. One of them, Malik, a young black man in his 20s, shifted uncomfortably. He's not hurting anyone, sir. He's just sitting. Halston's face twisted. Oh, great. Now the help's defending him too. What is this, a charity? This is my property. My rules. If that crusty old bastard isn't gone in 5 minutes, call the cops. I don't want my guests seeing garbage like that while they tee off. Inside, Deja Simmons, a black waitress in her 40s, overheard everything. She froze, plate in hand, rage flashing in her eyes. She had a father who'd served in Vietnam, a brother lost in Iraq. She knew that look, the 1,000-yard stare. She looked out the service window. The man hadn't moved, just kept staring at the photo in his hands. A plastic bag protected the image, old, bent, water-damaged. It showed a young Marine with a goofy smile arm slung around Knox's younger self. They were somewhere hot, dry, dusty. You could almost hear the whir of helicopters behind them. Knox stared at it like it was the last real thing left in the world. The kitchen manager came in. Deja, you good? She nodded slowly, pulled out her phone and snapped a photo through the glass. I think I've seen that man before. In a military wall of honor. Maybe City Hall or the mayor's office. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The cops were on their way. Halston smirked. Told you. Vets like him. They're relics. They belong in VA hospitals, not behind my restaurant. A moment later, 2 officers arrived. One of them a rookie. As they approached, Knox stood slowly. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just gently tucked the photo back into his pocket. The rookie hesitated. Sir, are you armed? No, Knox said. Just cold. The older cop nodded toward the alley wall. Turn around, sir. Knox complied, his body stiff from cold and arthritis. They patted him down. He said nothing until he saw Halston leaning over the balcony again. Knox looked up and murmured, voice low and rasped from years of smoke and sand. You know, I pulled a kid out of the fire once. His name was Nathaniel Parks. Lost a leg, but I got him home. Never screamed once. Halston laughed. Well, he ain't here now, is he? You must not have done that good a job. And with that, Knox was cuffed. The younger cop frowned. Do we really need cuffs? Halston barked from above. Don't get soft now. He's a repeat trespasser. If he was black, you'd already have him on the ground. Malik, still standing at the kitchen door, turned sharply. Excuse me. Halston waved dismissively. You know I'm right. Don't act offended. We've got standards here. Knox, still bent forward in cuffs, said nothing. But Malik walked out to the alley and stood beside the officers. I'll ride along, he said. I want to make sure he's okay. Halston scoffed. What are you, his lawyer? Deja, now at the door too, added quietly. No. He's a human being. They led Knox toward the cruiser. He didn't struggle. His eyes scanned the horizon like he was still on patrol. When they opened the door, he looked back just once at the club, the balcony, the man with the wine glass. And softly he said, "I buried men better than you." Inside the kitchen, Deja sent the photo she'd taken to a friend at City Hall. A minute later, her phone lit up. "Is that Gerald Knox?" "Oh my God, that man. He's in the mayor's private memorial file. He saved David Parks's son in Kandahar, 2006. Deja stared out the window, the cruiser lights fading into the distance. Where are they taking him? Downtown court. Minor trespassing charge. Probably jail overnight. She grabbed her coat. Then I'm going too. Why? Because no veteran should be remembered by a government file and forgotten by the people they saved. What happens when the man the mayor owes everything to shows up in court, wearing handcuffs, and no one remembers his name? That's not just some homeless vet. That's the man my dad talks about every Memorial Day. Thumbnail twist quote. He carried my father on his back through enemy fire. And today they cuffed him like a dog. You ever look at someone and realize the whole world forgot them, but you didn't? If you knew the man lying face down in the cold was the reason your father came home from war alive, what would you do? Would you speak up? Or just scroll past, comment below? And while you're here, subscribe to this channel because we tell the stories others bury, especially the ones that make you uncomfortable. Now let's get back to Gerald Knox. The squad car rolled past City Hall as snow began to fall, swirling like ashes on the wind. In the back seat, Gerald sat with his eyes closed, lips barely moving. Was he praying, remembering, or just surviving another hour the same way he had for decades? Inside her car, Deja Simmons gripped the wheel like it was a lifeline. The dashboard clock read 6:12 p.m. She drove fast, heart pounding. Her phone lit up again, this time from Tanya, her twin sister, a teacher and part-time local historian. I looked him up. The text read, Gerald Knox, field medic, Marine Corps, Kandahar, 2006. Saved 6 men during an ambush. One of them was Nathaniel Parks, the mayor's son. Deja nearly swerved. She pulled into the municipal lot, slammed the door, and ran up the courthouse steps past 2 tourists, snapping photos of a statue that meant nothing today. Inside, the courtroom was already beginning to fill. A few locals, a bored court clerk, and unexpectedly a young white couple in business suits filming B-roll for a veterans support PSA. One of them whispered, "What's the charge again?" "Trespassing. Homeless vet. Should be a quick one." They didn't know. Gerald Knox sat alone at the defendant's table, still wearing his tattered Marine jacket. No lawyer, no allies. Just the smell of dust and the gavel's echo waiting. Case number 2193. City of Elmridge versus Gerald M. Knox. The judge, a middle-aged white woman with sharp features and a colder tone, looked over the file, visibly annoyed. "Third citation in 2 months. Same alley, same restaurant, same complaint. Your Honor." The prosecutor began, a man with a perfect tie and zero compassion. "This defendant continues to disregard private property laws. We recommend a 30-day no trespass order and assignment to the regional homeless shelter in District 6. Gerald looked up at that. District 6 was a known nightmare. Overcrowded, dangerous. Run by a manager who'd been accused of abusing residents, especially older black men like him. The judge glanced up. "Mr. Knox, do you have counsel today?" "No, ma'am." "Do you wish to speak for yourself?" Gerald cleared his throat. "I wasn't begging. I wasn't harassing. Just trying to stay warm. That's all." The prosecutor laughed under his breath. "With respect, Your Honor, this is a clear pattern of loitering and urban nuisance. We cannot keep giving him passes because he wears an old uniform." That's when the doors burst open, and in walked Mayor David Parks. The room went still. The mayor, tall, silver-haired, visibly winded, locked eyes with Gerald. He blinked. For a long time he didn't speak. Then he addressed the bench. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge blinked in surprise. "This is highly irregular, I know. But so is this case." He turned toward the gallery, then to the cameras that had begun rolling. "This man," he pointed, "is not a nuisance. He's a hero. And I wouldn't be standing here, my son wouldn't be alive if not for him." A murmur ran through the room. Deja stepped forward from the gallery, holding up the photo from her phone. "This is him. That's Knox. That's the man my uncle served with. We've known the story for years, but we didn't know the name." The prosecutor stiffened. "Your Honor, this has no bearing on the facts." "The hell it doesn't," Parks snapped, stepping forward. 2006. Kandahar province. My son's patrol was hit. Gerald Knox ran through open fire twice to pull him and 2 others to safety. Took shrapnel in the leg, didn't even stop. He refused medevac until the last man was safe. The judge adjusted her glasses, clearly shaken. "Is this verified?" she asked. Parks nodded. "I have the Pentagon file. I've tried to find him for years. He disappeared. Turns out he didn't disappear. He just slipped through the cracks, like too many." That's when another voice spoke up from the back. It was Tanya, Deja's twin sister, holding a binder. "I'm with the Elm Ridge Historical Society," she said. "And I have something else. Knox was recommended for the Silver Star, but the paperwork was lost during the 2009 VA data breach. His case was never followed up." The entire courtroom leaned forward. "I also have copies of 5 eyewitness accounts," Tanya added. "All former Marines. All said the same thing. Knox never left a man behind." The judge looked at Gerald. "Is this true?" He nodded once. "Did what I was trained to do." The room went silent. Even the prosecutor's mouth was slightly open. Then from behind the camera crew, a voice spoke. "I was there too." An older black man with trembling hands stood up. Military pins on his coat. "I was the one Knox pulled out second. I'd lost blood. Thought I was dead. He wouldn't let me go. Told me, if I can carry my pack, I can carry you." Then he dragged me half a mile. Someone began to cry. And then the unthinkable happened. The judge stood. She walked down from the bench, faced Gerald directly, and said, "I'm sorry. On behalf of this courtroom. On behalf of this town." Deja stepped forward and handed Gerald the photo. "I think you've been alone long enough." He looked at the image. Nathaniel Parks, smiling, alive. Then at the people around him. Then back at the judge. "Are we done?" he asked quietly. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "No, Mr. Knox. We're just getting started." Word of Gerald's arrest spreads. The military hears. The VA responds. But someone in power doesn't want his record restored. Why? "Your Honor, this man has been warned 3 times. He's a disturbance to the public." The prosecutor's voice echoed through the courtroom like a hammer in a cathedral. Cold, mechanical, certain. But this time no one flinched. "Let me ask you something. If someone dragged your son from enemy fire, would you let them freeze behind a dumpster? Or would you fight for them like they once fought for you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're tired of seeing our veterans erased, forgotten, humiliated, hit subscribe right now. We're not letting these stories disappear." Gerald Knox sat motionless, spine straight, shoulders squared. Not because he wasn't tired, he was, but because something old had returned. Something buried for years beneath hunger, shame, and silence. Dignity. Across from him, the young prosecutor adjusted his tie. He looked barely 30, hair perfect, smile taught in law school, eyes devoid of depth. This is a city code violation. He continued appealing to the judge. Sentiment cannot override the law. Mr. Knox was found trespassing. This is not about war medals. It's about order. Do you know who you're talking to? The words didn't come from the bench. They came from the crowd. Everyone turned. It was Nathaniel Parks, the mayor's son, now grown, walking with a cane scar up one side of his jaw. He had entered the courtroom unnoticed, standing quietly in the back, his presence like a slow-building thunderstorm. The prosecutor blinked. Excuse me, but this is a closed proceeding." "Not anymore," Nathaniel said calmly, "because this proceeding is built on a lie." He walked slowly to the center of the aisle. "I was the one he saved. Gerald Knox, in Kandahar, 2006. I took shrapnel in the ribs. Couldn't move. Knox crawled across an open road under sniper fire, tied a tourniquet on me with his own belt, then carried me back, like I weighed nothing. Took a round in the shoulder doing it. I passed out on his back. Woke up in Germany." The gallery was silent. The judge, no longer cold, no longer detached, leaned forward. "Why haven't we heard this before?" Nathaniel glanced at the prosecutor, then at Knox. "Because he never talked about it. That's who he is. And because people like him," he pointed at the prosecutor, "don't ask. They just assume. Because Knox is old. Because he's black. Because he's broke. Because he sleeps near a vent." Murmurs erupted. One of the camera crew whispered, "We need to go live." But before they could, something else happened. A tall, sharp-featured man in a navy suit stood up in the gallery. His voice calm, rehearsed, icy. "Your Honor, I am Matthew Keene, Regional Director of the VA Benefits Office. I have something to say." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You're not on the docket." "No. But I'm here to correct a mistake." He stepped forward holding a file. "Mr. Knox's service record was flagged in our system 10 years ago due to incomplete discharge documentation. His file was miscategorized as non-honorable, which suspended his benefits. The error was ours. I'm here to formally acknowledge that mistake and initiate corrective action." Gerald didn't react, but his eyes blinked once slowly, like someone waking from sleep. Effective immediately, Keene continued. "Mr. Knox's status will be restored to honorable discharge with full benefits, backdated, including housing, medical, and compensation." The room should have erupted in cheers. But it didn't, because Deja's voice cut through the moment with surgical precision. "And what about the 10 years you let him sleep on the street? What about the winter nights he almost froze to death? What about the trauma you buried under red tape?" She stepped forward, eyes ablaze. "You don't get to sweep it away with one apology. You let a decorated veteran become a criminal in the eyes of this city while men like that prosecutor smiled over court wins. You let a black man who fought for this country rot in silence, and now you want credit for fixing it?" Keene flinched. The judge looked stunned. Deja's sister Tanya stepped beside her. "She's right. We run a history center. We know how easy it is to erase a name, especially if it's black, especially if it doesn't fit the poster on your wall." Silence. Thick. Guilt-laden. The judge looked at the prosecutor. "Would you like to respond?" He adjusted his tie. "I was simply doing my job." The judge's voice hardened. "No, you were protecting privilege. You ignored humanity. You saw a jacket full of holes and thought it meant nothing." She turned to Knox. "Mr. Knox, is there anything you'd like to say?" He stood slowly, cleared his throat. "I was never angry. Just tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of seeing the flag fly over people who never fought for it while the ones who did eat out of trash bins." He looked at the prosecutor. You ever lose someone in your arms? Ever pack what's left of a man into a black bag while bullets fly over your head? No answer. Knox turned to Nathaniel. I remember what you said, that you were scared your legs wouldn't work again. You cried. And I told you, you'll walk again, son. One day you'll walk into a room and people will see your worth. I meant that for you. But I guess I needed to hear it too. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. Then slowly he saluted. Semper Fi, Sergeant. Knox nodded. Semper Fi. Suddenly the gallery stood. Every veteran, every witness, even the black woman janitor in the back who had stopped sweeping. One by one they saluted. Even the judge stood. Only one man remained seated. The prosecutor. The judge looked at him. Mr. Latham, you're dismissed. Effective immediately. Your license will be reviewed for ethics violations. Gasps. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Because justice had spoken first. As Knox walks free, someone from his past steps out of the crowd. A face he never thought he'd see again. But is it a reunion or a reckoning? Do you know how it feels to be saluted by the same country that once stepped over you in the snow? When the courtroom stood for Gerald Knox, it wasn't just respect, it was revelation. And the moment should have been his peace. But instead, someone unexpected whispered his name. Gerald turned slowly, unsure if he'd imagined it. His body had grown used to the silence, the invisibility, the being forgotten. But this voice came from the crowd, soft but certain. Gerald. A woman stepped forward. Middle-aged hair pinned back, eyes full of storm and memory. She wore no makeup, just a dark navy blazer with a small service pin. Gerald's breath caught. Cassandra. It was her. His wife. The woman who had left him after Afghanistan, after the VA delays, after the trauma turned him into someone he didn't recognize. And yet she stood there trembling, a letter in her hands. I never stopped looking, she said, her voice breaking. But they told me you were dead. The courtroom hushed again. I called. I wrote. They said your case was sealed, that you were discharged without contact. I thought you didn't want me. Gerald's mouth opened, but nothing came. Even the judge, hardened by years on the bench, turned away discreetly to wipe her eye. Cassandra stepped closer, holding the letter out. It's from our son, the one you never got to meet. He's a corpsman now, serving in Germany. The entire room shifted. Tears, gasps. Nathaniel Parks swallowed hard. Deja put a hand over her mouth. Gerald took the letter with hands that trembled more from memory than age. But before he could speak, the courtroom doors opened again. This time, 3 uniformed Marines entered, a full colonel, a sergeant major, and a corporal with a polished wooden case in hand. The judge rose immediately. Colonel Rowe, she said. We've been expecting you. The colonel stepped forward. Eyes locked on Gerald. Staff Sergeant Gerald M. Knox, United States Marine Corps, retired. You were recommended for the Silver Star for actions on June 14, 2006 in Kandahar. That recommendation was lost due to a clerical failure. He paused, then nodded to the corporal who opened the case. But after reviewing updated declassified footage, testimony, and internal documentation, the Department of the Navy has authorized an upgrade. He pulled out a gleaming medal, the Navy Cross. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. By order of the Secretary of the Navy, and in recognition of conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action, the Navy Cross is hereby awarded to Staff Sergeant Gerald M. Knox. Gerald stood frozen. The colonel stepped forward and pinned the medal onto Gerald's tattered jacket. Deja whispered through tears, "That's the second highest combat award in the military. Second only to the Medal of Honor." The judge, still standing, nodded with reverence. "Mr. Knox," she said, her voice steady, "this court owes you more than a ruling. We owe you an apology for what was taken from you, for what was never given. Then she did something no one expected. She walked down from the bench and stood beside him. So did Nathaniel Parks. So did Cassandra. So did the twins, Deja and Tanya, both black women who had watched too many of their own go unnamed. And slowly, one by one, the entire courtroom formed a line. Not to shake his hand, but to stand behind him. Because this, the judge said, her voice firm, is what justice looks like when it remembers its promises. Even the bailiff, a white man with a Marine tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve, stood at attention. The prosecutor, Mr. Latham, long dismissed, watched from the hallway, stripped of position, relevance, and dignity. And as the cameras flashed, Gerald finally spoke. "You don't owe me anything," he said, his voice low and cracked. "You owe it to the ones who didn't come home, the ones who can't stand here. I just got lucky enough to be seen before I died." He looked at the medal, then at Cassandra. "I don't want honor. I want to remember what it felt like to matter. And for the first time in years." He smiled. Then something truly unexpected happened. The mayor took the mic from the media station. "I am officially naming this courtroom the Gerald M. Knox Veterans Justice Hall. From this day forward, no veteran will walk through these doors without being seen, heard, and honored." Applause. Real, roaring, cleansing. But just as the emotion swelled, a voice from the back interrupted again. "You better mean that, Mayor." All eyes turned. It was a white-haired veteran in a wheelchair, his name tag reading Wallace Trent, a Vietnam survivor who hadn't spoken in public in 15 years. "Because if you don't, we'll be right back here. And next time we won't wait for permission to raise hell." Laughter. Cheers. Gerald looked at Wallace and saluted. The colonel leaned toward the judge. "We've arranged transport. His new housing unit is ready, fully accessible. And his benefits include back pay, nearly $400,000, plus lifetime medical, all already processed." The judge smiled. "Then I suggest someone call him a cab." "I don't need one," said Gerald. "I'll walk." 2 weeks later, Gerald stands in front of a classroom of young cadets, but one question from a black female student brings him to tears. What does she ask that breaks him completely? He walked through bullets to save others, but for 20 years no one remembered his name. Not the city, not the VA, not even the people he once bled for. Now, 2 weeks after being honored with the Navy Cross, Gerald Knox stood in front of a classroom full of cadets trying to remember what it felt like to belong again. "Let me ask you something. Do you know someone who gave everything and got nothing in return? Would you say their name? Or would you let the world forget? If you believe names matter, comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. These stories deserve more than silence." The room was quiet. 20 fresh uniforms, clean boots, sharp minds. Young men and women barely old enough to understand what real sacrifice looks like. Gerald scanned their faces. He wasn't nervous, but he was haunted. Haunted by the years of being invisible, of being that old man behind a restaurant. He spoke slowly, his voice rough but calm. "I didn't come here to talk about war. I came to talk about after." He paced gently, his limp noticeable but proud. "You'll wear the uniform with pride. You'll come home with scars. Some will be on your skin. Most will be elsewhere." He paused, looked at them. "But the real fight, the one they never train you for, starts when the war ends. When the thank yous stop. When no one remembers your name." In the back row sat 2 young black women twins. One wore an ROTC pin. The other clutched a notebook so tightly the corners had bent. They had seen Gerald's story online. Deja and Tanya had brought him here not as a hero, but as proof. Proof that history doesn't always honor its best men. Especially if they're poor. Especially if they're black. especially if they don't ask for praise. A cadet raised his hand. Sir, did receiving the Navy Cross make it all worth it? Gerald looked at the medal pinned to his faded jacket. It's not about the medal. It's about the memory. For 20 years, I didn't exist. You don't know how hard it is to forget your own name, until no one says it anymore. The room grew heavier. Even the professor, a former Air Force colonel, lowered his eyes. Then it came a question no one expected. From the back, the quiet twin, the one with the notebook, stood. She wasn't just asking for herself. She was asking for every forgotten name etched into memorial walls, for every black uncle buried without honors, for every sister who came home to silence. She asked, Sir, after all those years, after everything you went through, do you still remember your name? Gerald froze. His fingers curled slightly. For a moment he couldn't speak, because the answer was no. He hadn't remembered. Not for years. He had been that guy, old man, vagrant trouble. Not Knox, not Gerald, not Staff Sergeant. Just gone. But now, in a room of cadets, some white, some black, some just barely grown, they waited. Not with pity, but with respect. Gerald swallowed. I remember now. The young woman nodded, then turned to the class. And in a whisper that became a wave, they began to say his name. One by one. Gerald Knox, Staff Sergeant Knox, Gerald M. Knox. And suddenly, for the first time since Kandahar, he stood tall, not because he had to, but because they remembered. Outside the window, the sky turned soft with snow. Inside, warmth spread in silence. Later that night, Gerald sat in his new apartment, the one gifted through the Veterans Initiative. It wasn't big, but it had heat, a kitchen, and a nameplate on the door. G. Knox. His Navy Cross sat beside a stack of letters, one from his son, now serving in Germany. He hadn't replied yet. He would. But not tonight. Tonight he boiled water for tea, sat by the window, and watched the snow fall. The room smelled of fresh paint, of beginning again. A knock came at the door. It was Cassandra, his ex-wife, now something else entirely. She brought soup and a photo album. They sat together without speaking, turning pages of a life almost lost. Gerald touched a photo of his younger self in dress blues. I forgot him, he whispered. Cassandra put a hand on his. He waited. They didn't need a thank you. They didn't need a parade. They needed that moment, quiet, honest, whole. Some heroes don't need applause. They just need their names spoken before time erases them. Gerald Knox was never asking for more than a second chance to be seen. So we ask you now, whose name have you forgotten to say? Say it today. And if you believe no veteran should ever be invisible again, subscribe to this channel and help us tell the stories that matter. Because in the end, respect isn't owed, it's remembered.